I would not be truthful if I didn't think that this had affected my son. Children are very vulnerable and very sensitive, and I know that Robbie knew something was going on with me. I thought, this is the end of my life. I'm going to die here, and nothing is fair, and poor me, and I hate this, and I hate everybody.
Natalie Cole's family finally confesses the secret that killed her.
The record came out, and I was still on heroin. And the day that I first heard this would be on the radio, I was in New York, in Harlem.
While America celebrated her Grammy-winning voice, she was shooting heroin in Harlem crack houses. The same needles that gave her hits of drugs gave her hepatitis C, a virus that stayed silent for 30 years before it killed her.
She was very protective of her family and her close friends, and I don't think that she wanted people to start feeling sorry for her.
Her family kept the deadly secret, the confessions that explain everything. So let's get into it. February 6th, 1950, Los Angeles, California. In the exclusive Hancock Park district, Natalie Maria Cole entered the world as music royalty. Her father, Nat King Cole, commanded stages worldwide with his velvet voice. Her mother, Maria, had sung with Duke Ellington's orchestra. The Coles weren't just wealthy. They were the first black family to break the color barrier in one of LA's most prestigious neighborhoods. But even before Natalie could walk, the cracks were showing. While Nat toured constantly, young Natalie craved any connection to her absent father. She'd listen to his records obsessively, not out of musical interest, but desperate for any piece of him she could claim.
I liked everything my dad liked, even if I didn't like it, because he was not around that much. So I would want to get involved in whatever he was doing when he was around so we could spend that time together.
The tragedy that would define everything came when Natalie was just 14. December 1964, her father was diagnosed with lung cancer. By February 1965, the man with the golden voice was gone, leaving behind a 15-year-old daughter who never got to say goodbye. Maria Cole, devastated by widowhood, transformed overnight. The warm mother became distant and controlling. The family's grief pulled them apart instead of bringing them together. For Natalie, attending boarding school in Massachusetts, the isolation was complete. Lots of fans think that this loss created the void that would later consume her life. But all evidence suggests the real damage was just beginning. At university, away from her mother's watchful eyes, Natalie discovered something that made the pain disappear, at least temporarily. The University of Massachusetts became her laboratory for self-destruction. What started as typical college experimentation escalated rapidly. By 1973, she wasn't just trying drugs. She was injecting heroin between her toes to hide the track marks. Even though nothing is proven, all evidence points towards a young woman who had never learned healthy coping mechanisms. Her privileged upbringing hadn't prepared her for real emotional pain. When grief and pressure collided with readily available substances, the combination was devastating. But here's where the story takes its first shocking turn. In 1975, just as her debut album Inseparable was climbing the charts, Natalie was arrested in Toronto for heroin possession. The media largely buried the story. A young black woman's addiction wasn't worth protecting, but her father's legacy was still profitable. The arrest should have been her wake-up call. Instead, it became a masterclass in deception. Natalie learned to compartmentalize her public and private selves with frightening efficiency. During the day, she'd record vocals that would earn Grammy nominations. At night, she'd disappear into Harlem's drug dens, shooting heroin with strangers who had no idea they were sharing needles with music royalty.
The record came out, and I was still on heroin. And the day that I first heard this would be on the radio, I was in New York, in Harlem.
That frozen moment revealed the devastating contradiction of her existence. America was falling in love with Natalie Cole's voice, while Natalie Cole was literally killing herself on the streets of New York. The juxtaposition was so surreal that even she recognized its tragic irony. By 1976, she'd managed to get clean from heroin through sheer willpower and family intervention. But lots of fans think that her victory celebration was premature. Some conspiracy theories reveal that she simply traded one addiction for another, and the new one would prove far more destructive. Cocaine was different. It was the drug of success, of celebration, of the entertainment elite. While heroin made her sleepy and withdrawn, cocaine made her feel invincible. For someone carrying the weight of a legendary surname and the pressure of living up to impossible expectations, that feeling of invincibility was intoxicating. The princess who had refused her father's crown was about to discover that some kingdoms aren't worth inheriting, especially when the price of admission is your soul. 1976 marked the beginning of what should have been Natalie Cole's golden era. Her marriage to producer Marvin Yancey seemed like a fairy tale. Two creative souls building both a life and a musical legacy together. Their Chicago wedding was intimate, their collaboration produced hits, and when baby Robert arrived in October 1977, the family appeared complete. But behind closed doors, paradise was rotting from the inside out. The cocaine that had initially fueled their creativity now controlled their every waking moment. What began as celebration lines after successful recording sessions evolved into daily necessities just to function. Marvin, the church pastor's son, who'd once grounded Natalie's spiritual life, became her primary drug partner. It's not confirmed, but all evidence points towards a couple who enabled each other's worst impulses. They developed an elaborate system of dealers, secret stashes, and coded language. Their home studio sessions stretched for days, not because of artistic passion, but because they were too high to complete coherent work. The first public cracks appeared during live performances. Natalie, once known for her powerful stage presence, began delivering lackluster shows. She'd forget lyrics to her own hits, stumble through choreography, or worse, nod off mid-performance. Industry insiders whispered about her exhaustion, but the truth was far more disturbing. Even though nothing is proven, all evidence suggests that by 1979, both Natalie and Marvin were spending upwards of $1,000 per day on cocaine. Their joint bank accounts hemorrhaged money. Recording advances disappeared before albums were completed. The couple who'd seemed destined for musical immortality was burning through their future at crack pipe speed. The marriage couldn't survive the chemical warfare they'd declared on themselves. Fights became violent. Trust evaporated. In 1980, they divorced, but the legal separation couldn't break their toxic bond. They continued using together, co-parenting while codependent, unable to save themselves or each other.
I would not be truthful if I didn't think that this had affected my son. Children are very vulnerable and very sensitive, and I know that Robbie knew something was going on with me.
3-year-old Robert became an unwitting witness to his mother's self-destruction. The internet went crazy saying that Natalie would disappear for days, leaving her toddler with nannies who were themselves struggling to manage an increasingly chaotic household. Child services was never called, but friends later admitted they'd considered intervention multiple times. The most devastating incident came in 1981. While Natalie was locked in her bedroom smoking crack cocaine, Robert wandered into the backyard unsupervised. The pool gate, which should have been secured, stood open. 3-year-old Robert fell into the deep end. Only the quick thinking of a nanny, who happened to glance outside at the crucial moment, saved Robert's life. She pulled him unconscious from the water and performed CPR until paramedics arrived. While her son fought for his life, Natalie remained locked in her drug-induced stupor, unaware that she'd almost lost everything that mattered. The near-drowning incident should have been her rock bottom. Instead, it became another secret to bury, another trauma to medicate. Lots of fans think that this event marked the point where Natalie's addiction transformed from self-destructive behavior into something that endangered innocent lives. Some conspiracy theories reveal that multiple interventions were attempted during this period, but Natalie had become a master manipulator. She'd promise sobriety, attend a few therapy sessions, then return to the streets of Los Angeles seeking her next fix. By 1982, her physical appearance shocked even hardened industry veterans. Her weight had plummeted to barely 90 pounds. Her once lustrous hair hung limp and lifeless. Track marks covered her arms, leading her to wear long sleeves, even in California's heat. The woman who'd once been compared to Aretha Franklin now looked like a walking skeleton. Maria Cole, watching her daughter's public deterioration, made the devastating decision to petition the courts for control of Natalie's estate. The legal documents painted a picture of complete incapacitation. A Grammy-winning artist who couldn't be trusted with her own checkbook. The princess had finally lost her kingdom, but the real battle for her life was just beginning. October 2nd, 1982. Los Angeles Superior Court. Maria Cole stood before a judge, asking for legal guardianship of her 32-year-old daughter. The court documents made for devastating reading. The proposed conservatee is unable to properly provide for her personal needs for physical health, food, clothing, or shelter. Natalie didn't contest the petition. She couldn't. By then, she was barely coherent most days, existing in a haze of cocaine and crack that had reduced her to a shadow of herself. The daughter of Nat King Cole, once America's musical sweetheart, had become a cautionary tale whispered about in record label boardrooms. The intervention that finally broke through came from an unexpected source: her business team. In November 1983, 3 men in dark suits appeared at her Hancock Park home. Dan Cleary, her manager, accompanied by her attorney and business manager, delivered an ultimatum that would save her life.
I had people who loved me and who were able to say, they just couldn't take it anymore. They said, Natalie, please, do something. And
the bluntness of their statement cut through years of enablement and denial. These weren't family members driven by emotion. They were professionals who'd watched her destroy herself for nearly a decade. It's not confirmed, but all evidence points towards a woman who had reached the absolute bottom of human existence. Friends later revealed that Natalie had been working as what she called a tout for prostitutes, earning money to buy drugs by directing clients to sex workers. The Grammy winner who'd once commanded 6-figure performance fees was literally selling her dignity on street corners. The Hazelden Treatment Center in Minnesota became her last chance for redemption. But even there, surrounded by medical professionals and addiction specialists, Natalie's initial response was pure rage. She hated the other patients, despised the counselors, and spent most of her first month plotting her escape.
I thought, this is the end of my life. I'm going to die here. And nothing is fair, and poor me, and I hate this, and I hate everybody.
The breakthrough came during a group therapy session focused on family trauma. When asked about her father's death, something inside Natalie finally cracked. For the first time since she was 15 years old, she allowed herself to grieve, not just for her father, but for the childhood she'd lost, the mother who'd become a stranger, and the woman she'd almost killed with drugs. But even as she began healing emotionally, the physical damage was becoming apparent. Years of intravenous drug use had consequences that wouldn't manifest for decades. Lots of fans think that Natalie's later health crises were unrelated to her addiction, but some conspiracy theories reveal a direct connection between her drug-sharing practices in the 1970s and the diseases that would eventually claim her life. During her time at Hazelden, routine blood work revealed something troubling in her system. The doctors couldn't identify it then. Hepatitis C testing wouldn't become standard until the 1990s. But the virus was already silently destroying her liver.
And that was the turnaround. That was like, God, she's got it. She's really got it.
The moment everything changed came in her final week at Hazelden. Instead of counting days until release, Natalie found herself terrified to leave. The protected environment had become a sanctuary where she could exist without the constant craving for drugs. For the first time in over a decade, she was thinking clearly. When she walked out of Hazelden in May 1984, Natalie Cole was technically clean. But even though nothing is proven, all evidence suggests that the real work was just beginning. The industry that had enabled her addiction for years wasn't going to welcome her back with open arms. Radio programmers who'd quietly removed her songs from rotation during her worst years weren't eager to give second chances. The internet went crazy saying that her comeback was impossible. A has-been addict trying to reclaim a throne that had been occupied by younger, more reliable talent. But what the critics didn't understand was that Natalie Cole had survived something that kills most people who attempt it. She wasn't just clean, she was reborn. And she was about to prove that sometimes the greatest art comes from the deepest pain. 1984 to 1990 should have been Natalie Cole's redemption arc. She was clean, focused, and desperate to rebuild the career she'd nearly destroyed. But the music industry has a long memory for unreliability, and lots of fans think that her struggles during this period were deliberately orchestrated by executives who'd written her off as damaged goods. Record labels that once courted her now refused meetings. Radio programmers, burned by her previous no-shows and erratic performances, wouldn't add her songs to playlists. The woman who'd won Grammy Awards was suddenly struggling to book casino gigs in second-tier markets. Even though nothing is proven, all evidence points towards a systematic blacklisting that went beyond normal business considerations. Industry insiders later admitted that Natalie's addiction had made her a liability, not just professionally, but legally. Insurance companies refused to cover events she headlined. Venues demanded cash deposits, and tour promoters required medical certificates proving her sobriety. The emotional toll of professional rejection triggered something dangerous in someone with her history. While Natalie didn't return to drugs, she developed what therapists would later recognize as substitute addictions: compulsive shopping, obsessive exercising, and most destructively, an addiction to prescription medications that flew under everyone's radar.
It was becoming more difficult for her to be a pop artist. I always say that the greatest thing you can do is retreat and attack in another direction.
The breakthrough that saved her career came through the most painful decision she'd ever made. In 1990, producer David Foster approached her with a concept that had been suggested for years: an album of her father's songs. Every previous time, Natalie had refused. Performing Nat King Cole's music felt like admitting defeat, acknowledging that she could only succeed by writing his legacy. But desperation had a way of changing perspectives. Some conspiracy theories reveal that Foster deliberately chose this moment when Natalie was most vulnerable, knowing she'd finally agreed to the project that would make them both millionaires. The recording sessions for Unforgettable Web with Love became a form of therapy she hadn't expected. As she sang her father's lyrics, Natalie finally began processing grief she'd buried under 25 years of drugs, anger, and resentment. The little girl who'd lost her daddy at 15 was finally getting to spend time with him, even if only through vintage recordings and studio technology. The album's success was unprecedented. It spent 5 weeks at #1, sold over 7 million copies, and swept the 1992 Grammy Awards with 7 wins, including Album of the Year. The virtual duet with her father on the title track became a cultural phenomenon, played at weddings, funerals, and every sentimental moment in between. But the success that should have healed everything instead created new problems. Natalie's second husband, Andre Fisher, who'd produced the album, became resentful of her dominance in their professional partnership. The internet went crazy saying that he felt emasculated by his wife's triumph, especially when she won Grammys for categories where he'd expected recognition. Their marriage imploded under the pressure of her success. It's not confirmed, but all evidence points towards a pattern in Natalie's relationships. She seemed drawn to men who initially supported her recovery, but eventually became threatened by her strength. The divorce in 1995 was bitter, expensive, and emotionally devastating. More troubling was what was happening inside her body. The hepatitis C virus she'd contracted through shared needles in the 1970s had remained dormant for decades, silently attacking her liver while she celebrated sobriety and career resurrection. Even though nothing is proven, all evidence suggests that the stress of her comeback, combined with the physical toll of decades of abuse, was accelerating the disease's progression. During the Unforgettable tour, Natalie began experiencing symptoms she attributed to exhaustion, fatigue, joint pain, and mysterious fevers that would come and go without explanation. Her doctors, unaware of the virus multiplying in her system, prescribed rest and vitamins. Lots of fans think that this period represented Natalie's complete victory over her demons. Some conspiracy theories reveal that she was actually entering the most dangerous phase of her life, one where the consequences of her past were about to collide with the demands of her present in ways that would ultimately prove fatal. February 2008. Natalie Cole was in the studio, recording what would become her final masterpiece, Still Unforgettable. At 58, she'd survived addiction, rebuilt her career, and found peace with her father's legacy. The call that came that afternoon would shatter everything she thought she knew about her future. Her doctor's voice was carefully neutral. "I need you to see a specialist immediately." The blood work that was supposed to confirm her excellent health had revealed something that had been hiding in her system for over 3 decades: hepatitis C. The virus she'd contracted from sharing needles in Harlem crack houses in the 1970s had finally announced its presence. For 25 years, it had silently destroyed her liver while she celebrated sobriety and Grammy victories. The irony was devastating. Just as she'd found peace with her past, that past was preparing to kill her. The treatment was brutal. Interferon chemotherapy, administered weekly for 48 weeks, designed to boost her immune system's ability to fight the virus. The side effects were comparable to cancer treatment: severe fatigue, muscle aches, depression, and dramatic weight loss that left her looking skeletal. Even though nothing is proven, all evidence points towards a deliberate decision to hide her condition from the public. Lots of fans think this was about vanity, but some conspiracy theories reveal a more practical concern. Insurance companies and concert promoters were already skittish about her history. A hepatitis C diagnosis would have ended her touring career immediately. The deception required extraordinary effort. During her 2008 Japan tour, Natalie performed 14 shows while receiving weekly chemotherapy injections. She was literally dying between performances, spending entire days in hotel rooms too weak to stand, then summoning superhuman strength to deliver 2-hour concerts.
I went to Japan against my family's wishes while in the midst of doing these injections. I was on chemo. I lost about 25 pounds. I was in a wheelchair. I was sick every single day for about 7 months.
The wheelchair became her secret. Audiences saw her walk on stage under her own power, never knowing she'd been wheeled to the wings minutes before. The woman who'd once been called the bass queen for her crack addiction had become the hidden queen, a master of concealing her true condition from a world that demanded perfection. But the treatment that was supposed to save her liver was destroying her kidneys. It's not confirmed, But all evidence points towards a medical cascade where each intervention created new problems. The interferon that cleared the hepatitis C virus also triggered focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, kidney disease that would require dialysis 3 times per week. The internet went crazy saying that Natalie's 2009 kidney transplant was a complete success. Some conspiracy theories reveal that while the surgery saved her life temporarily, the immunosuppressive drugs required to prevent organ rejection made her vulnerable to every infection, every virus, every opportunistic disease that crossed her path. The final diagnosis came in 2010, pulmonary arterial hypertension, a rare lung disease with no cure and an average survival time of 5 years. The same lungs that had made her voice famous were now slowly suffocating her from within. Every breath was a struggle, every performance an act of defiance against her own mortality. December 31st, 2015, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. As midnight approached and the world prepared to celebrate a new year, Natalie Cole's heart finally surrendered to the decades of damage. The official cause was congestive heart failure, but the real killer was the ghost of a 15-year-old girl who'd never learned healthy ways to process grief. Even though nothing is proven, all evidence suggests that Natalie Cole didn't die from bad luck or random illness. She died from the consequences of sharing needles in the 1970s Harlem, a decision made by a broken teenager that took 40 years to claim its final victim. The woman who'd sung Unforgettable had become exactly that, but for reasons far more tragic than anyone realized. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.